Hello, folks, and welcome to the A to Z Sports Big Orange Podcast. I am Charlie Burris. That is Zach Reagan. Wherever you listen throughout the world, thank you very much for listening to our show here. We talk everything Vols every week on the podcast. If that's something that you want to listen to on the reg, go over to the A to Z Sports Podcast Network feed on Apple or Spotify. When you get there, rate, review. But you got to make sure you subscribe, because if you do subscribe, you won't miss our shows when we drop them on Mondays. Speaking of Mondays, it is one right now at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We usually do this at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, but hey, it's all, we're here. Zach had a baseball game for his son, but we made it. But it doesn't matter. If you subscribe, you'll see our show regardless, because we post it there on that feed. But we're also live on YouTube. And you got to go over to the A to Z Sports Tennessee Volunteers YouTube channel and subscribe there and hit that notification bell, because, again, it doesn't matter what time we go live. You'll be notified when we go live if you hit that notification bell. So go and do that too. At Charlie_Burris, at ZachTNT, at A to Z Sports, Facebook.com/A to Z Sports Nashville, A to Z Sports.com for all the stuff that Zach writes about on the internet. And Zach, our long national nightmare of 2 or 3 weeks is finally coming to a close. Spring football is right around the corner. And so for yourself, the content drought is hopefully about to end. But what's up, man?
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if this will be our last spring practice ever. They're kind of talking about moving to some OTAs across the sport, which I like the idea of. In my mind, I'd do that. Close the winter portal, make one portal, make life easier on everyone. But we get it this year at least. We'll see where it goes from here. But looking forward to it. Lots of things to watch with lots of new players that could be in some new positions this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's all the NFL at this point. Just let's admit it and just do what the NFL does. Like the spring, I don't want to shave off the spring game. The spring practice, the spring game, it is always so fun, especially when you get early enrollees now. I like it, even though ultimately a lot of the time it's just kind of meaningless. It's a fun, but it's a fun showcase for the fans.
Mm-hmm.
So I say keep it. And today on the show, we're going to talk about spring practice because it starts on Friday. And so we're going to do a quick preview of that. We're also going to talk about baseball. Is this baseball team better than last year's team that won the national championship and won 60 games? We're going to talk about that too. Am I being hyperbolic? Maybe, maybe not, crazily. And then to start off, that we're going to talk about that basketball game. Holy cow. Beat the Alabama Crimson Tide on a last-second 3.8, a nearly half-court 3-point shot. I can't believe it. It was, I thought I was dreaming. So let's get right into that right after I tell you about the good folks at Zen Sports. And at this point, you all know about Zen Sports. We've been talking about them for so long. They've been a partner for so long. A great partner with us here on this show. But if you don't know, now is the time to download the new sports betting app in Tennessee. That is Zen Sports. And you can get that $100 no-danger first wager when you place your first bet in Zen Sports. You can get reimbursed for the amount of your bet up to $100 if that bet loses. And no other sportsbook offers you a premier sports betting experience with 24/7 top-tier customer service and faster withdrawals like Zen Sports. There's even more big news. Speaking of Tennessee baseball, NCAA baseball is now live on Zen Sports. So go get in on that action. Download Zen Sports at zensports.com today. That is Zen Sports. Betting just got better. If you have a gambling problem, 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older in Tennessee to bet. And Zach, now that we're not doing the monthly sweepstakes with Zen Sports, which were really fun. They were cool things, but the disclaimers at the end are so much shorter. Thank goodness. Not as much legalese there at the end. So Zen Sports, go download it right now. All right, let's get into this basketball game, and then again, spring practice and baseball coming up, but basketball first, because we talked about it last week. We did a preview of the game, And this was one of the bigger games. I mean, some people were saying is the biggest game in Thompson bowling history. And what I don't know about that. It was huge. It was a huge game. And, people were saying that because a number 1 seed was possibly on the line for Tennessee, which is massive. This would be the first number 1 seed in the history of this program if Tennessee can pull it off. And what you did by pulling this win out of the fire was you've now put yourself in the best position that you've had to get a 1 seed under Rick Barnes. And I can't believe that because of just the conversations that we have had all year long, starting with the fact that the SEC, this is probably the best the SEC's ever been. I mean, this league top to bottom is phenomenal. You're probably going to get 11 or 12 bids to the NCAA tournament. It's crazy. And then you add on to that Tennessee lost Dalton Knecht a year ago. I mean, he's one of the most prolific scorers in the history of this program, probably top 3 that you have ever had. And you lose him. And then you come in, and we've had this criticism all year long. Oh, can they figure out the offense? Can they do this? The defense is really good, but I just don't know if they can score. And they just continue to find a way. And now you have probably your best opportunity to get a 1 seed ever in the history of this program. Pearl got really close. Barnes has gotten close on 2, 3, 4 occasions now. And I just starting there, this Alabama game, I mean, it wasn't pretty for Tennessee, but it was, I love this. I've definitely said this before on the show. It wasn't pretty, but it was beautiful. I know you probably watched this game, Zach. What'd you think?
Yeah, I mean, we were texting throughout it, and I know we both had some frustrations that we aired at times during the game that will remain hidden from public view.
Possibly in the last 30 seconds where we were going, I can't believe we're going to lose Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, for starters, like you said, it's a huge game, right? Like number 1 seed on the line. It's one of those games where whoever loses is still a good team and can still make some noise in the tournament. I think that's true of Alabama. I mean, obviously, they're a good team, and they're not a team that anybody's going to be happy to run into in the tournament. And if Tennessee would have lost, I would have felt the same way. That's just somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose. Sometimes it goes your way, sometimes it doesn't. The resolve, though, to find a way to win that game. There were some offensive possessions late in the game where it's just, what is Tennessee doing? No direction, felt kind of panicked. They've had some other moments like that, kind of at end of game situations this season, where it's like Alabama's leaving the door open. If you can come through here and convert on some of these possessions, and you're turning the ball over, you're not taking good shots, it's rushed. Kind of like that, one of those Kentucky games, that Milicic said at the end that they kind of just lost themselves there. Like it happens, and that does need to get cleaned up moving forward, because you're good enough when you're confident. When they're good enough, when they're confident and they believe, and they're not trying to force it, that they can go score. But to put yourself in a situation to make it tough on that inbounds play, right? Turned the ball over. I mean, inexcusable on Alabama's side because they had 2 timeouts remaining, but I don't think that they were ready for the defense that Tennessee was going to play on that inbounds play. I think they had their play drawn up that they thought they could execute, and Tennessee just wrecked all of it. Their whole plan there was destroyed because of that's the calling card of a Rick Barnes team, and that right there is why it's so important. I mean, that is what puts you in position to win the game, and then, of course, the shot to win it. I mean, it couldn't have been a better person to hit that shot, right, than Meshack, with everything, that's been said about him through the media, and that Tennessee's better when he's not on the floor because the numbers say this and that. I'm like, well, that just blew that out of the water, because you don't win that game before that without his defensive effort and everything that he provides there. But for him to hit that shot, I mean, what one of the most memorable wins that this program's ever had. And it coming at this time of year, propelling you into March. I mean, it was March 1st. I mean, that was that kicked off March. That's what everybody saw. It's like March Madness is here. Like it's arrived already. feel like that gives this team some real confidence moving forward. I mean, that's exactly the type of win. Now you got to go out and finish it off this week. You can't be too high on it, but that confidence that this win gives Tennessee, I think, can really propel them, and we'll see where this thing goes.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, I think it was the game of the year in the SEC, maybe the game of the year in all of college basketball. Oh, and actually, Jared says that here in the comments. Says best game of the year.
Yeah, it's an incredible game. Any college basketball fan had to love that game, right?
Yeah.
Whoever you are.
It was amazing. And for it to have occurred on March 1st, I mean, when the clock turned over to March, is just so perfect. But to your point, I think that's absolutely correct. You have so much going for you right now. Like this team in 2019, when you had Rick's other best team, but besides last year with Connect, I mean, they would have run roughshod over the SEC. They would have been Auburn this year. And because you look at this, I was just looking at this while you were saying that. I was looking at Kim Pom, and I didn't realize this until this exact moment on this show right now. Tennessee, as much as people we're saying, oh, the offense is they go through these stretches where they can't figure out right now. Tennessee's offensive efficiency, according to Kim Pomeroy, Tennessee's offensive efficiency is better than last year. I'm not making that up. It is the number 27 offensive efficiency in America right now. Last year's was 28th. And so, I mean, you are pulling a rabbit out of a hat at this point, and it's with guys that prior to this season, I don't know that I would have said I don't believe in them at all, but it's not dudes that I would have tabbed to be like, that's a huge difference maker. Jordan Gainey.
Off the bench.
I mean, oh my gosh. I mean, it's and on a team that we've talked about all season long, I mean, you have limited depth with this team. They run a short rotation. And you have Gainey coming in. Gainey was massive at the end of that game. Some of the shots that he made were incredibly clutch. And he's been huge. Obviously, he won you that Illinois game. He's had other huge moments all through the season. And you have him. And then Chaz Lanier. Here's a piece with Chaz Lanier. He obviously made the 3-point play. Serendipitously misses the free throw at the end. Meshack gets the rebound and his series of amazing plays that he made. And then it turns into a 4-point play with Meshack making those clutch free throws. But Chaz Lanier, go and watch the inbound play where they get the 5 seconds on Alabama. He fights through a screen that if he didn't get through it, Alabama would have had a layup right at the rim. I mean, it would have been right there. It was great, screening action if it actually worked on Alabama's part. And he fights through it and makes an awesome defensive play that turns into a 5-second play. This is a small thing for my own, satisfaction. But I feel like with 5-second plays right there, there's a lot of people that would go like, you can't call that in that moment. Oh my gosh, you'll never see that. Yeah, Nate Oates didn't call a timeout, but nobody actually thinks they're going to call a 5-second, call there. And that's a fair point.
It doesn't get called enough, really, if we're being honest.
Exactly. And I actually went and tested it. I saw somebody post this on Twitter too with an actual stopwatch. It was almost 6 seconds. It was actually slow. They gave him grace.
It is kind of weird that in this day and age of all the technology and everything that we have that we look at replay, that there's not an actual shot clock on that, like and I'm fine with there not being. It's the way it's always been. But it's kind of surprising, like a play clock in the NFL, that there's not some sort of shot clock on the inbounds play and advancing the ball to half court.
Every single bit of officiating in college basketball is just up to the ref, how they're feeling that day.
I mean, you just count the 5 in your head. It's however. I mean, not everybody counts the 5 the same way.
And you can even tell, it's kind of funny, like, comparing it to an actual clock, you can tell the ref, he gets to like the 4 count and it's kind of slow. Like he's doing the arm action like you do. and is sort of slow, and you could tell that's where he gets behind and how
It's
it
a
almost
long,
ended up at 6 seconds.
it's almost always a long 5 seconds, which I'm fine with.
Yeah.
But I mean that there's you
But
should be mad
it
at your
was
coach if anyone.
Yeah, and it was 100% a real 5 seconds. They should have called that. Nate Oates is an idiot for not calling timeout there.
You had two.
Yes, and frankly, if they just made their free throws down the stretch, that's a win for Alabama right there. They're not incredibly fundamentally sound. They never really have been under Nate Oates. That's not his game. But yeah, just the defense on the subsequent play. I will say, you got pretty close to getting a move and pick on Akpara on that play, but thankfully it was very, very borderline, and I don't think they would have called that in that spot anyway.
Getting the shot off. I mean, he obviously got the shot off, but he did not have any time to spare.
It was
when they showed the replay, I was like, oh my god, that was closer than I thought it was live.
Yeah, and then you had, I mean, this is probably the biggest factor out of all of it. You had not only Rick Barnes, but Zakai Ziegler adamantly calling timeouts. Both of them calling timeouts right in the face of the ref. But thankfully, the ref had already he had resolved, like, we're not doing timeouts right now.
Yeah,
and he already had his arm up. Yeah, I mean,
it was funny. Which on it, like, two things. One, watching the replay. Right after it happened, I saw Barnes yelling at the official as Meshack crossed half court, and I didn't know at the time until somebody texted our group text and mentioned that Barnes was trying to call timeout. I was like, oh, that makes sense, because he was giving the ref the business, and I was like, what could you possibly be yelling about at this point? But so often it feels like in those situations, if you call the timeout and you run a set play, like the ball just gets knocked away and a shot, you never get a shot off. Like, that happens so often. So I always kind of liken that. If you've got, 3 seconds like you do there, you've got time to dribble and get set and get a shot, right? I mean, Meshack was calm, he's collected, he was in total control. He didn't rush it. I think that's why he made the shot. But I like that situation better, to kind of let it play out if you can. Than that set play from half court, because it's too often it just goes overtime.
I couldn't agree more, 100%. And the thing is, first of all, Meshack can make threes. He's not absolutely horrendous. I mean, he's made some big threes. He made a very big three against Texas A&M at Texas A&M. And Grant Nelson played lazy defense right there. He should have been up on him, and he just slacked off. And
I wonder if that was like hey, don't foul, no foul, no foul.
I think it was
type deal.
Yeah, they were trying to be very cognizant of that, because the refs had been ticky-tack at different points in that game.
Man.
And so I guess I can't totally blame them there, but I mean, you give that
you got to pressure a little.
Exactly. You got to at least get a hand up. And I mean, you give you or me that shot 10 times, we'll probably make at least 1, 2, 3 of them.
Yeah.
Like, it was what, 30 to 35 feet, somewhere right in there.
It's the Steph Curry shot.
Yeah, I mean, guys like Curry are making that shot 10 times a night.
Yeah,
and Meshack can make threes. It was just all the way around, allowing this. I mean, giving up an and one to Lanier, allowing the rebound to Meshack, and then not calling the timeout, and then playing poor defense on the ensuing.
I think that was
shot by Meshack.
Something else that Oates admitted that he messed up is he didn't have the right personnel in rebounding wise on that play.
Yep, I saw that. I mean, it was a comedy of errors on Alabama's part. And I like this comment from Elias. He said, I said on Twitter after that free throw rebound that Meshack deserved a game ball regardless, but did not expect that ending. 100%. No. The plays that Meshack made, that rebound alone was pretty much it. But he just plays that tenacious defense constantly. I loved in the post game where he was getting asked those questions, as you were kind of saying earlier, where it was like, what do you say to the people who say that Tennessee might be better off offensively without you on the floor? Crap like that. And he was like, honestly, the thing that I love is, I forget exactly how he said it, but he was like, I love when I'm facing a guy who has the ball and he knows he can't do anything against me. He said something like in that vein. Again, I don't remember exactly how he worded it, but this kid takes true pride in his role on this team. And it's so beautiful, because in an age where everybody is pay me, I'm the star, set me out front, build my brand, do all of this crap. This dude is like, no, I'm going to go out and I'm going to be the best defensive player in America. And he's gotten these great accolades on a national level. I mean, I love the back and forth that he's been having with Dick Vitale is so great. They donated to Dick Vitale's charity and did all this stuff. There was a lot of great stuff.
Pretty cool that he was on the call for that too. I mean, anybody
was.
that grew up watching Dickie V call games.
I know, and I love it. It was a little buried. I wish he would have been a little louder, but you could hear him in the background going, "Are you serious? Are you serious?" It's so good. But it just Meshack, the way that he embraces just, I am the defensive guy. That is me. And I will say, I've been one of the people that has said, and it's just true. I think if Jemai Meshack is being honest with himself, there have absolutely been times this season where he is a liability on offense. Teams do not respect him on the perimeter, and so they can slack off and give more attention inside the 3-point line because they know that he is not a great shooter in that way. Like there's some to be said there, but his role and what he contributes is not in question in any way, shape, or form. Hopefully this solidified that for anybody that
I mean, on the flip side of it too, I mean, how many great offensive players have been liabilities on the defensive? I mean, Dalton Connect.
Yeah.
I watched. He was better. Connect was better last night against the Clippers. He had to play some extended minutes and scored 19. Had a really nice game. I watched him play against where they played. When they were playing Dallas. It was like Luka's, playing Dallas again game, and I saw him guard Klay Thompson 2 or 3 times. And Klay is not he's not Kyrie out there, right? He's not taking guys off the dribble. He had Connect off his feet and was hitting threes right in his face. I mean, but it seems like you overlook it, right? When they're a prolific scorer, you're like, yeah, well, you just got to kind of take that with it. Well, Meshack's the exact opposite of that at times, and he can score, but like that defense is obviously worth it. I mean, you're willing. I think you almost have to have that in some sense to win a championship.
You do. I mean, I love actually just in the last couple of weeks the Memphis Grizzlies, of who I am a fan. They did a little documentary about Tony Allen. I don't think it's come out yet, but they did, and it's called The Grindfather. Which, I mean, what is there a cooler name in all of basketball than The Grindfather? But Tony Allen, I mean, he built his entire reputation on being the most annoying guy on defense. That was his entire thing.
He's got a few of those guys, and man, they're usually on championship teams. Bruce Bowens and Dennis Rodmans. I mean, they're guys that help win championships.
Yes, it's huge. Yeah, Elias says I always preferred defense because it's just so fun annoying the piss out of the poor guy you're getting to make look bad. And Meshack has done that so much. I mean, he did it probably most notably a couple years ago against Alabama. Played an unbelievable game against Brandon Miller. And he's had that kind of game a whole number of times. And yeah, I mean, it's just so great. And this is the ultimate payoff. I mean, I was so happy to see the kid get this because he, after laying back and embracing that role so much and being a little more of everybody always says, oh, he doesn't show up on the stat sheet. He doesn't show up on the stat sheet. Well, he showed up on the stat sheet tonight or 2 nights ago. And that's awesome for him. But you have a lot more going for it. Jason says right here, he says, I think our X factor is actually Cade Phillips because he's our best big guy. Yeah, you have more going on right now that really deserves to be talked about. Kind of to what I was saying earlier, where right now you have better offensive efficiency than that Dalton Connect team did. And you're the number 1 defensive team in America, again, according to Kim Palm. So you have so much going for you because this team has figured out a way to score enough points to win all of these games. Is it always beautiful? No. But they figure out a way. They figure out a way to score all these points. Then you have the best defense in America. And you add all of that together, and that's a pretty powerful combination. So playing right at the right time. Can you finish this out now? That's the real key because you have at Ole Miss, which that's a scary spot.
Mm-hmm. Any road game in the SEC at this point cannot be taken for granted.
Yeah, they're a tournament team, and they're not amazing, But I mean, you have a coach. I mean, Chris Beard's coached the team all the way to a national title. So I think there's, I don't know. I don't want to put too much on it, but man, it would just be so special to get this number 1 seed. To finally get one of the things. It's two things are left for Rick Barnes at this point that he hasn't done for Tennessee. Number 1 seed in the Final Four. Those are the only 2 things left. And I think you could get that number 1 seed and you would be giving yourself the best chance at a Final Four. Some of these projections have come out for Tennessee to be the number 1 seed, and the draws would be incredible. Whereas like Wisconsin is the number 2 seed, Texas A&M is the number 3, and like you run down, like Tennessee could beat all of these teams.
Yeah.
And I've already said it in past weeks, but if you could put yourself last year in the number 1 seed, you don't run into Purdue. You don't have to deal with that. This year, there's not really that Purdue team. Auburn is not even that team. I mean, you already nearly beat Auburn on their home floor this year. But I want it bad. I can't. I didn't think this team was going to get anywhere close to a number 1 seed. And go back and listen. I'll own it 100%. I said earlier in the season, you're not getting a number 1 seed. You're not winning the SEC. This is a good team, but it's not that team. And they have put themselves in this position. It's amazing.
What's the scenario right now for the SEC tournament seeding?
I think Tennessee is still hanging at the 4.
That would be really nice. Just cut another game, out of the picture. We've talked about that before. The SEC tournament can be so brutal physically if you go all the way. If you get one of those top 4 seeds, it's just one less game you got to play, regardless how it turns out. And I think that'll be really helpful going into the tournament. Clearly, it was last year to some extent, losing to Mississippi State, surprisingly.
You're solely in the 4 spot.
So if you got to win out to secure it, 1-1.
And you look at the way that these schedules fall. So Florida and Alabama are the 2 teams ahead of you. They're both 12-4. You're 11-5. They play each other. It's on Tuesday or Wednesday, one of the 2 days. And so one of them is going to fall back to 12-5.
What's the tiebreaker on that?
That I don't.
I mean, is that?
That's what they just did for the women's bracket. They did a coin flip for number 1 between Texas and South Carolina. So, yeah, probably. But I think your rooting interest here, because Alabama plays Florida, and then what is it? Alabama plays Auburn, and so you would go. You're rooting for Alabama to beat Florida. I think this is also for number 1 seed. You want Alabama to beat Florida, and then Auburn to beat Alabama.
Yeah.
And I think that would be ideal for everybody all the way around. I don't know what is Alabama's final or Florida's final game. They have Ole Miss at home. I mean, that should be a win for them. So, yeah, you're ideal for the SEC, and number 1, obviously you win out, and then Alabama beats Florida. Alabama loses to Auburn, and I think you're probably the 3 seed.
You'd definitely be above Alabama at that point if they.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yes, you would be the 3 seed in the SEC, and then you'd get almost certainly get a number 1 seed in the NCAA tournament. So they pulled this kind of scenario off last year, winning the SEC. There was Tennessee just had to take care of its business. They went and did that. They won at Tuscaloosa. That was a big clincher in that whole run there, and at South Carolina, if I'm thinking correctly. And you finish with South Carolina, but it's at home, thankfully. So.
Yeah, that Ole Miss game really the one. You got to get through that one. And South Carolina should be a celebration, kind of the season, last home game of the year type deal.
If you lose that Ole Miss game, you probably you have, for sure, Florida has to lose to Alabama, and you probably got to win 1 or 2 in the SEC tournament, maybe 2. You might have to make that title game to get a 1 seed again. Yeah. But then every season it's like, oh, the tournaments don't matter in NCAA seeding. So
Yeah,
really know.
it's hard to predict when it comes down to those last few teams like that, and who's going to get that last one seed or anything like that. We've seen them make some questionable decisions before, so just take it out of their hands and win these last two.
We'll figure it out. Yeah, that's it on basketball, I think. I was trying to think of anything else. We'll leave it there. Go beat Ole Miss. They are very beatable. At the same time, they beat Alabama at Alabama this year, so watch out. And yeah, go get yourself a 1 seed, and we will talk about that next week. Now, to football, Zach. Spring practice, or the first press conference for spring practice, I believe, is Friday with Josh Heupel. We'll get his incredible quotes that Josh Heupel always is producing. He definitely is not just spewing coach speak and trying to tell you as little as possible while saying probably the fewest amount of words possible.
I do appreciate that he doesn't. I mean, he doesn't hide that that's what he's doing. At least it's not like the Butchisms. He's just like, he's kind of smirking while he's doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good relationship with the media with Heupel. Yeah. Everybody kind of, everybody understands what's going on. He doesn't. It's not Butch Jones where he's trying to put on a show and try to be that strong arm guy.
It's also not. Shout out to Josh Heupel too for his cigar, calling the cigar with like 6 minutes to go, or I think the game was tied. It was like 66-all, maybe. I can't remember when he did that. And then he was back at the Lady Vols game on Sunday, which unfortunately they're kind of going through a bit of a slump, which they'll be fine. First year, new culture, long season, it happens. But Heupel also doesn't get into the whole Kirby Smart, Nick Saban, just that very like old school college football coach where you're almost like the governor of the state up there talking to reporters, and you're politicking and you're complaining and you're talking about all the issues in the sport because that's how you get your message out there. Heupel doesn't do really any of that. He's just kind of like whatever situation, scenario they put in front of us, we'll deal with it. I'm sure behind closed doors, he's probably a little more passionate about changes and the way the sport's going, but he doesn't get up there and get on the soapbox and do all that politicking stuff. And I appreciate that because that stuff is annoying. Like Kirby Smart's one of the best coaches in the sport. It's so annoying to listen to him following Nick Saban's footsteps and act like he's just angry about everything and he has the answers. No one else does. And that stuff's nonsense.
Yeah, I do. In general, I like how Heupel handles all of that stuff. Even if I do wish he was a little more, of a fun guy.
He has moments. He has some moments.
He does. Yeah, he does. I mean, he seems. He really leaves it more in situations like at a basketball game like that, where he's playing it up for the crowd and doing all that stuff. That's more of who he is rather than going out and giving a lot in a press conference.
Not to get too caught up on Heupel and pressers, but that moment last season where I can't remember what game it was. There's some horribly officiated moments. Maybe it was the Georgia game. I can't remember.
Oh, yeah.
Where he pushed the microphone towards
the microphone,
he
held it out.
Question. Yeah. Just
that was good.
Like, next question. That was pretty smooth.
That was good. Yes. So he absolutely has his moments. There's no doubt about it. But I'm not expecting a lot out of Heupel there. And we say this before every fall practice, before every spring practice. Don't put a ton of stock in what we're seeing. There's also, for sure, this news hasn't come out yet. It probably will, if not Friday in the next, week or two. But there's going to be guys sitting out, and and there's no, you might hear, it's a big name player who's not practicing in spring. It's not that big of a deal. Generally speaking.
One question he will get asked off the bat, and is going to be the most interesting question of the day, is the Ricky Gibson situation, which we haven't even talked about because last week we just kind of previewed the basketball game. It was a weird week, but the Ricky Gibson situation, I think, and really the cornerback position as a whole is really the biggest story going into this season, because I think you never really know what to expect. They're going to compete for a spot in the playoff. We'll see how good they are. How there's a lot of youth we'll get to here in a bit that has to step up in a big way this fall. the cornerback position is kind of making you nervous. Jermod McCoy with the torn ACL. We don't know when he's going to come back. They sound optimistic that he'll be able to help this team. We'll see how his rehab goes. And then Ricky Gibson out of nowhere saying he's going to enter the transfer portal after spring practice. There's so many questions there that we need answers to. Does he practice with the team? Do they give him whatever deal I assume he wants? Because why else would you pull this move? As the one unfortunate thing besides McCoy's ACL, which is out of anyone's control, it's the one unfortunate thing with this program that's happened this offseason that I'm super interested to see how it plays out, because I don't know what you do if you're Josh Heupel. What would you do in his situation?
It is a very annoying thing because
I'm sure he thinks the same thing.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I'm sure he's banging his head against the wall behind closed doors. But you always hear in a situation like this, like a lot of behind the scenes, it's like, oh, it's agent driven, or it's a family member that's getting in their ear, it's whatever, and they're just trying to take advantage of the situation. I don't know where this is coming from. Maybe it is purely just Ricky Gibson himself formulating this, but it is just an opportunistic thing. And I wish that across the board, these guys just had, oh, I love Tennessee. I came to play for the Big Orange, and that's why I'm here. But the fact is that's not true with a ton of these guys. Not every single one of them, but a lot of them. And here, I mean, it's a money thing. If it's not a money thing, I would be flabbergasted. And
it's certainly not a playing time thing.
No, yeah, I mean, he was about to be with Jermod McCoy out. He's your best guy. He's your best defensive back.
He's a good player. He played really well last year.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure he's looking and he's going, yeah, I know the position that I'm in. If Jermod McCoy's out, I'm the best guy you got. So you better pay up. And supposedly, I mean, did I see? I don't want to steal anybody's behind a paywall reporting, but was it that they had actually already done a new deal?
I think that's some of the assumption. I mean, look, most players that's happening because this is like a year-to-year thing, right? You're a free agent after every single year, and you've got to work out a new deal. I don't know how that happens, how that works. Everybody's different scenarios, different requests. But I think with Gibson, it's like you said, he's the number one guy. All this leverage, really, even if McCoy hadn't torn his ACL, he's still an important player because you have a lot of unproven depth behind him. But I think it was on 3. It was Pete Nakos or somebody like that had done some reporting and talked to collectives anonymously, and there was no like groundbreaking information they were sharing, but they were just talking about kind of what positions are hard to find in the portal. And their overwhelming response was one that wide receivers are insanely expensive right now, and so are quarterbacks, but everyone knows that. And then offensive line and cornerback are like the 2 hardest positions to find. They're just, and you see that across the NFL, right? Like there's just not that many elite guys at those positions as there are maybe a wide receiver or running back or some other positions. If Gibson goes in the portal, like he'll get paid from somebody.
Oh yeah.
I don't know who, but he'll get whatever he wants because there's just nobody, there's not many people like him. They're going into the portal that are proven in the SEC over, 13 games last season.
I mean, Elias says for all you know, he may not be getting a fair shake relative to what he should.
And that might be true.
For some equal amount. Yeah, it really might be.
Yeah.
There's no way to know the numbers behind the scenes. Nobody's releasing any of that information. It's not like the NFL where you can have this information out there and know what guys' contracts are.
That's why I've been kind of hesitant to like go hard, on either direction here of like, like I don't want to trash Ricky Gibson. At your core, you're thinking it should be about the team. They'll take care of you if you produce at a high level. They're going to take care of you at Tennessee and Knoxville. We've seen it. But then it could be something like that, and we just don't know. So it's without all the information, it's hard to really take a side, I guess, in this. I don't know what you do if you're Heupel. Like, what precedent do you set? What somebody else come up asking? I mean, that's the hard part.
Any prescription I give here, I have to say, if it's this before it, if it is just purely opportunistic, Ricky Gibson trying to go for the biggest check possible, you got to let him go. I think you got it. You cannot set that precedent on this team of just being like, you can enter the transfer portal and steamroll us. Like you can't do that.
I agree, but like on the other side, then I mean, not even counting like, yeah, you need this guy, but what does that do for you in recruiting from an NIL perspective from that point forward? Because George is going to go after the same player you're going after and be like, look, they wouldn't pay him when he got up there and played well. You didn't go up there and you're going to play well for a year, and then they're not going to pay you. I mean, that's exactly what. It's a tough spot. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, there's
and I know
no real winning.
I know Tennessee's not the only program dealing with this. I know basically every program is. It's tough. Like, it's a really tough spot.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it really is. I mean, I hope it's not that cut and dry, and because I get that the kid is looking out for number one, as you should. I have been such a huge advocate of players getting paid for so long. As long as I have ever been talking on a microphone about sports, I've been advocating for that. And before that, I was ranting to, my wife about it before I was ever on. And so I can't say that I blame him for getting his value there, but at a certain point, we have to take situations like this as a jumping off point to go, we got to put guardrails on this thing. There has to be, it either is guardrails or full transparency on these contracts or something where it can't just be this easy because like we're talking, you set that precedent of you can just throw your name in the portal and, well, you're good. So we got to throw you a giant check. Yeah. And
bad, like it's real bad. You don't.
Yeah.
It's I think it's worse now doing it this way than it was. You see it at the end of the season, right? Like Mike Matthews, Boo Carter, Tyler Barron in the past. We've had people kind of flirt, threaten the cryptic tweets that we've seen for years now. But doing this, that's happening all across college football at the end of December. Like you just kind of like, let's see the situation is when the dust settles. Let's not get too caught up in who's threatening what. It's just their negotiation tactics. But when you do it like this so publicly, one, it makes me wonder, was there any attempt from Gibson and his side to talk to Tennessee behind the scenes about this and maybe get a deal worked out? And if there was, there obviously was then pushback from Tennessee, and that's why he chose to do this. So Tennessee, in theory, maybe they could have prevented this. And now not only, but you didn't want to because you didn't want to give in to his demands, whatever. But now it's public and it's like, well, now everybody gets to watch this play out. Like if I could, even if I got to pay the kid an extra $200,000, I know it's not my money, but we know there's a lot of money in this sport and $200,000 is basically nothing at this point for anyone. If you got to pay the kid the extra $200,000 to keep it out of the news, I mean, I don't have a problem with that. Yeah.
No, not at all. I mean, Clint says, I almost feel like Gibson has to be paid because without him, we would be in trouble at cornerback. You don't pay what we're paying overall to be bad at one position that holds the team back. That's a very fair point.
I mean, who's guarding Ryan Williams in Tuscaloosa?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you had one of the best dudes in the SEC in Javon McCoy, and he, even he was getting roasted by old boy at that Ohio State, like, Jeremiah Smith. There's only and so
Jeremiah Smith's first touchdown, Gibson was like on his shoulder and the ball was just in his hand. Like there's nothing else you can do. Sometimes that's So imagine having somebody that's not as good as Gibson. It is. It's a position where you really need talent. I mean, you need a good corner to win a championship. It's hard to do it without one in the SEC. Going up the talent's just too elite once you get to the playoff. If you go in there with a, second-rate guy, you're not going to be able to stop him. I mean, you're just not. So,
and I mean, if you consider this next year or two with Nico, or this year with Nico, and then Faison Brandon or whatever,
it's a great point down there too. We don't want to look over his last.
And see, this is another factor. Yeah, Elias said it would be a fantastically bad look if Ricky Gibson held out for a massive check and then had an ugly year.
Mhm.
I mean, that's a whole other
I didn't
piece.
even think about that.
Because that you see that in the NFL. Guys play games to get massive contracts, and they go out there and they stink after they get their giant paycheck. That happens all the time. So, yeah, I mean that's a good point and very, very possible. But if you consider what Tennessee is in right now, a championship window, so to speak. I mean, you already made the playoff. You're kind of right there on the precipice.
Culture's in a good spot.
Yeah, I mean, do you just have to treat it like, look, we got to throw money after this thing and just keep this kid on the team? And maybe it is that simple. I don't know what they're going to do, and obviously we'll talk about it when a resolution is reached. Apparently, he's still around the team. So, yeah. I would certainly hope Heupel gets asked about it, and we'll see, and we'll talk about that when it does. But that is a huge piece of spring. I guess we do have to talk about the rest of spring practice. I guess let's go through a couple of things that we're looking out for, with spring practice. Again, we kind of give it that disclaimer, like, don't put a ton of stock in what you see in spring practice. Ultimately, it's a good opportunity for these guys to get reps in. It's a good opportunity for fans to get a little exhibition of the team during the off season. And it's not a whole lot more than that. But I think Jared says, I think the media is sleeping on Nico. I mean, in spring, we'll be able to get to see more Nico. He looked kind of his toughest and his best near the end of the season. You'll get to see how he's progressing. You'll get to see, your transfers in, like the Star Thomas at running back. You'll get to see some of these young guys that are coming in. It's the kid from North Carolina, Isaiah. Why am I drawing a blank on his last name? The defensive lineman, Isaiah Campbell.
Yeah. He ended up being pretty highly rated.
Yes, I mean you'll get to see him. Hopefully, again, you don't know until you get there. Like sometimes these guys get held out, and if they do, so be it. But there's a lot I want to look out for. The offensive line. The offensive line's a huge one, especially now that Andre Karich got his extra year denied. I mean, who's playing guard for you on this football team? There's a lot to look out for.
Yeah, I think for me, offensive line, wide receiver, who plays center. Is it Sam Pendleton, the Notre Dame transfer? Yep. Does he stay at guard? Is it Satterwhite at center? How does David Sanders play as a true freshman? I mean, I think you forget, like, as highly touted as that guy is, it's a big jump to the SEC, and Sanders seems like he's as ready as anyone to make that jump. But you've never went up against SEC defensive linemen before, that are in their third, fourth, fifth year. Maybe it's going to be a different challenge, and there will be a learning curve there. How much does Lance Hurd improve? What's your depth look like? I mean, we've seen it's rare that you get through a season without, I don't think you do get through a season with all 5 offensive linemen healthy for 13, 14, 15 games. Like, there's going to be guys that have to step up, and, Dane Davis is not there to kind of bail you out to be that swing guy anymore. You've got to rely on some different guys now to be those depth pieces and to be the next man up. So how does that develop? It's a big prove-it year for Dylan Ellerby, and the offensive line coach. A lot of talk about how he's developed high school talent. You got to go do it now with your center, with your right tackle. And Lance Hurd, in a way, I know it's not a guy you signed out of high school, but he didn't play really that well for a lot of the season last year, and there was injuries, slow start. I think the upside's still there, but how does that get developed? So I think the offensive line definitely. I mean, if you don't get that right, nothing else is really going to matter. I mean, I think we saw that last season. There were times when Nico just didn't have time, and you can't get the ball down the field and be explosive on offense if they're rushing 5 guys and stopping you 4 guys. And then wide receivers. Go ahead.
Well, I was just on the offensive line. Obviously, you want to see David Sanders. You want to see if Ellerby can actually get a high school player up and ready to play SEC football, which he has literally never done in his time at Tennessee. Like, there's so much on that offensive line. But you were about to say with the wide receivers there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's almost the same thing there. You've got all this youth. I mean, Brazel's the only go-to guy coming back.
Yep.
But it's exciting because you got the talent. You got Mike Matthews, Braylon Staley, Travis Smith, Amari Jefferson. Elias mentioned, Boo Carter going on that side of the ball. Elias mentioned, want to see some signals about what they're going to do with Boo Carter outside of defense. I don't think we're going to see much of that just because of Heupel's nature. I think he's going to try to keep that as guarded as possible. But you do want to hear, some positive things about him coming out of spring. He's an X factor. I think he's the type of guy that can really make a difference at critical points in the game. Just got to have it catches, got to have it first down, third down plays where you got to have a first down, keep the chains moving. It's really exciting to have him in the mix. But, who does Mike Matthews develop into the star player that we think he's going to be? Does Braylon Staley?
You want to talk about a guy who has that sort of cachet of like, well, you got your paycheck. Now you better have a good year. I mean, that's Mike Matthews for you. That whole hullabaloo happened with him entering the transfer portal, and they struck a new deal, as it's now being called, when that news comes out. And yeah, I mean, it's crazy because I have for so long always been that like, okay, let's keep the direct criticism of the players on the lower end of things here because they're not getting paid. They're not, university employees. But at this point, I mean, you're under contract. And what am I supposed to say? If Mike Matthews has a crap year next year, I'm going to go, well, that wasn't worth it. And it's just going to be, that's going to be what it is. That's a very interesting element. And all of this,
it's almost like watching a
19-year-old.
It's almost like watching a 19 or 20-year-old in the NBA, right? I mean, they're open to the same criticism as every other NBA player. There are no, training wheels there on the criticism. So I think it does open players up to that. I still think it's very much a developmental age. But if you go out and you threaten to enter the portal, you better back it up because you're going to have a lot of criticism coming your way. Whereas if you just sit back and don't make it public, you'll get what you're owed. And that's really what NIL was created for. It was never supposed to be this. I think we all knew it would be this. I don't think we knew what it would look like, but it was always supposed to be go earn the money on your own based on how you perform. And if it was that, I think we'd have a lot less issues, but unfortunately it's turned into this free agency deal. But that's a lot of pressure on Mike Matthews to go be the guy. And I think he can be. I think what we saw in flashes, his body control, his route running, I think he can be a really good player for Tennessee. But you don't just have to be a really good player. You've got to go be a star player. I mean, you look at the teams that went deep into this tournament last year. Ohio State had 3 first-round picks. Like, Egbuka is going to be a first-round pick this year. Jeremiah Smith's going to be a first-round pick in 2 years, obviously, probably a top 5 pick. And Carnell Tate's going to probably be a first-round pick based on what we saw just from him being the number 3 guy last season. You got to have those types of dudes because you've got to go beat the best corners in college football in the playoff. So that's the type of performance that you need from Mike Matthews and Braylon Staley. And you might need a true freshman like Travis Smith to step up because we saw it all through college football last season. Alabama with Ryan Williams, Texas with Ryan Wingo, and Ohio State with Jeremiah Smith. I think Auburn had a true freshman too that played a lot of snaps for them and put up a lot of numbers. So these wide receivers have to perform better than they did last season if this team's going to get it past, if they're going to make the playoff again, if they're going to make it past the first round. It can't be drop passes. It can't be alligator arms on a wide open play because you see a DB coming. It's got to be more crisp than it was last season. You're gonna have to help Nico out. And every throw's not gonna be perfect. It's on Nico to get the ball to you, but you're gonna have to adjust and make some tough catches. Like, you got to go make plays. That's all there is to it.
And I really hope a young guy like Travis Smith comes in and pushes the dudes that you have in that room, because that, competition is the best motivator.
Mm-hmm.
And if you just have like that room at the moment is so shallow outside of freshmen that I'm not sure you're going to have a ton of competition. And it would be good if some of the young guys could bring that. Now,
I think he did say in an interview after he signed that he wants, I can't remember, it was some crazy numbers, like 800 yards, 1,000 yards or something, like 5 or 10 touchdowns. I mean, if he's that
Hey,
motivated, go get it.
come on down.
Go get it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's there, Heupel will do his best to get it to you. That's for sure. If you saw, after what happened with Jalen Hyatt, I mean, we know that they'll feed the beast if it emerges. So I'm interested to see exactly how that goes. You do also on defense outside of the Ricky Gibson situation and everything that's happening there. The defensive backs in general are going to be interesting, but the defensive line and the linebackers, I mean, you're specifically with the defensive line. You had so much turnover there. You got to think, I guess Bryson Eason is probably your old guy in the room.
He's old.
I mean, he's the old guy in the room.
Yeah,
What's he, fifth or sixth year?
Yeah, he was a Pruitt guy.
Yeah. But beyond that, I mean, you have I think Jordan Ross that guy's exciting. Oh, I think he's got a very bright future. Josh Josephs, obviously, they're going to have to kind of fill some of those shoes. Oh, and I did see earlier, I did want to mention, let's see. Yeah, Caleb asked, what do we think about James Pierce and his character concerns? We'll talk about that in just a second, Caleb. But speaking of James Pierce, but you now have guys that have to fill those.
Caleb Herring needs to take a big step. It's time.
Yep. But there's a whole set of guys where you want to see them move forward and move on and up, and you have a not necessarily a new coach. I mean, Chop is technically new, but he's been there for however long coaching. But now is officially the coach of outside linebackers. And so you have, a little bit of a new look there with the coaches. And does
that position take a step forward with him in that role
yes.
instead of Eckler? And I know he was helping out there before, but just being that singular voice now, that's a position that could take a big step forward. Eckler wasn't. I liked Eckler. I know there's mixed opinions on him. I thought he did a pretty good job with special teams. It wasn't always perfect, but the punt return stuff was nice. The energy, his enthusiasm. I mean, he bought into being a Vol. He stayed at Tennessee this stretch as long as he stayed anywhere in his career, but he was not this renowned edge rushers coach. And Coach Chop, I think that's more his lane. So it could be a position developmental wise that takes a big step forward moving forward. Just having that, like I said, that singular voice, that singular vision there, that could be something.
I hope so.
Exciting.
Yeah. I really hope that does happen.
That's outside of offensive line, corner, and your quarterback, obviously having a disruptive pass rusher is like the other necessary ingredient to winning a championship. You got to affect the quarterback.
And it kind of has to be both, because how they sort of had it, they have the Leo, who's a little bit more, your James Pierce, who could really play linebacker, and they actually drop him into coverage some. And then you have the guy that's sort of outside, but can also play inside some. And
Norman Lott was kind of that in a way,
ish, yeah. And so there's a lot of shoes to fill there, and a lot to look out for with spring practice. And we'll get down that rabbit hole as like the videos start trickling in and we start seeing more where they sit. But just across the board, there's a ton of interesting stuff that to see in this spring practice, starting with how they handle this Ricky Gibson thing and going on down through how is Nico developing, your new running back, your entirely new look wide receiver room, your offensive line, who's your center, how is the defensive line stacking up, the linebackers. I mean, it is all over the field, plenty of things to look for and talk about. And before we move on to this James Pierce stuff, we'll finish on that with football, Zach. But was there anything else before we move on to, I guess, until spring practice actually starts here on Friday?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'd be remiss if we just it's a position that's undervalued in football, but your running back position, you're losing one of the greatest players in Tennessee history in Dylan Sampson. Yep. He's the all-time, single season rushing leader, rushing touchdowns leader now at Tennessee. I mean, that's really an insane accomplishment, because there's been so many great running backs that have come through Tennessee, Jamal Lewis and Travis Henry, and just so many great players. I mean, that's tough to replace, right? I mean, the fact that he was hurt in that Ohio State game really handicapped your chances of ever winning that game. You didn't have your best SEC Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, you just didn't have that guy. and you got to replace him now. And I think you've got talent. Deshaun Bishop was a welcome surprise last season. I thought he played really well. Loved his effort. You know, it was like a Jawan Jennings style as a running back almost. And Peyton Lewis being a speedy guy, and bringing in Star Thomas. It'll be interesting to see if anybody from that group steps up and is like the de facto guy. Kind of like Jalen Wright was. It was a three-headed monster, but Jalen Wright was really the guy that whole time with Jabari Small and Dylan Sampson in 22 and 23. Who steps up? Is it Lewis? Is it Bishop? I don't know if it'll be Star Thomas, if that's quite his game. You know, was it Dwayne Morris? Does he come in as a true freshman and provide any quality snaps for you? You got to find some answers there. I think there's talent there, and you're encouraged by what you saw last season, but now you got to step up and really carry a much heavier workload. Because Sampson, that was the most carries that any running backs had under Heupel that Sampson had last season. And I don't think you want to go down that road again, period, because you just saw how beat up he was by the time December got here. But it still would be nice to have like a go-to guy like Dylan Sampson when he won you that Kentucky game in 23, you know, putting it away in the fourth quarter. Who's the guy that does that for you when you need it this season?
It does feel like they're going to go back to more of the running back by committee, all three guys getting a much more equal load there. I think, especially since you don't have a guy as talented as Sampson, I think that will be good. As you said, in the injury situation, it should really help there. I mean, and it was really tough last year because you had Deshaun go out for a whole stretch of the season too. I feel like people kind of forget that.
And he was still the second leading rusher on the team.
Yep. I mean, you have special guys on there. Peyton Lewis is really good. Deshaun is really good. And then Star Thomas we'll see, but it kind of feels like he I don't know if he'll be your quote unquote number one, but I think he's definitely going to be a big contributor. Like, well, I
think pass protection is going to play a big role in this too. Because who is the guy that you trust the most in pass protection? That's a lot of, you know, Star Thomas is new to your offense. So how does he pick up your blocking schemes? And then Bishop and Lewis, still young, how do they pass protect in that role? You know, because Sampson really took that on and had to be that guy. And he got better as his career went on at Tennessee at pass protection.
He was bad at the beginning.
That LSU, he got Hendon Hooker blown up in Baton Rouge. Didn't play again after that for a little while, I don't think. But that's going to be a huge part of this too, is you got to be able to protect the quarterback and pick up those blitzers that get through the offensive line. That's just as important as anything.
It definitely is. And so we'll find out soon enough. We'll talk about as practice begins. We'll talk about what we see, who's who's flashing in practice. We'll talk about all of that and a whole lot more going forward. And then I guess with football, let's get back to Caleb's question before I think Noah in the comments, he's asking about baseball. We're definitely going to finish everything with the show with the baseball and the absolute dominance that they're showing right now. But James Pierce in this weird situation where this report came out that he has character issues. And this is so goofy to me. Because specifically the nature of it, where, I mean, the report kind of said that he was already sort of like 1 foot out the door and they had trouble sort of corralling him and getting his head into the game. And that's why he didn't play as much as he could have. But he played a ton, and he played well. He didn't have the ultimate star-making number 1 overall pick like some people were calling like he would before the season started. But, I mean, he's really good. He's going to be a first-round pick. He's showed in the combine that he's an absolute monster, which we already knew. And this is just so... I don't know. Stuff like this, it always starts a conspiracy theory in my mind where I go like, is this just some team throwing this out there so they can try to get him on a bargain and try to, you know, disparage a young man's character so that they can get him on a better deal as he gets in there? There's I would assume that there's, you know, nuggets of truth to this whole thing. But what was described in that report, I was like, I bet there's 1,000 guys in college football that are like this, that are just especially in this age where everybody wants NIL and wants to be a star. Is that maybe I'm wrong, Zach? What do you think of this?
Yeah, we see this time of year, constantly, right? Like you kind of alluded to, is they're trying to, manipulate where the guy falls in the draft. I even last year there was somebody, I can't remember who it was, but the question Joe Milton's character, like there were character
Right.
concerns with Joe Milton. I'm like, the guy was the perfect teammate and got benched and stayed and supported Hendon Hooker. I mean, obviously there was no character concerns there with Joe Milton. So you always have to take this kind of stuff with a grain of salt. With James Pierce, I think he's a bit of an enigma. He was a 4-star recruit. Clearly, with his talent, probably should have been higher rated. I just don't think he cared about the recruiting stuff. I mean, we didn't really even hear about that guy till right before he signed with Tennessee in the early signing period. In what was that, 21, end of 21, I guess. It's just I don't think that's his game, and we've talked about this a little bit before with him. The fact that he's getting all that hype about being, maybe the top overall pick this time a year ago. And all this stuff we talked about with NIL, cryptic tweets, threatening to go into the portal. I don't know if anything happened behind the scenes with him in that, but publicly, that never happened with James Pierce. Like there was never really any concern. There was never any weird message board threads that popped up that alluded to maybe it happening or him tweeting stuff, putting stuff on social media. He just played. I'm sure he got paid well. I have no doubt that he did, but he didn't make a public spectacle of that. I think he didn't enjoy doing the media stuff. I know there were times that he was listed, like the email that Tennessee sends out, like who's gonna talk to the media, and he was on there some, and then just didn't. I'm talking about like the midweek stuff, right? Like he didn't come out and talk, and I don't know what happened with that. There's various different reasons that a player might not talk when you think they're going to. Maybe they're getting extra treatment. Maybe something happened during practice. You never know. But it just seemed like he wasn't all about that kind of stuff. And I thought this past week at the combine, he did a couple interviews with like NBC Sports and a couple of other places, and I thought he came across really well in those interviews. Yeah. And he was just about football, right? Like he was talking about, some of these great pass rushers that he's modeled his game after. And the reason he wore number 27, talking about Josh Heupel being the 27th coach at Tennessee. And I don't know if that's really why he wore the number, but the fact that he even put that stuff out there and didn't really, I don't know, it wasn't a lot of this. He was confident without being overly arrogant. I thought he came across really well. And I thought that him doing that media was a sign that he was making the effort to say, okay, people see this as a knock on me. I'm going to try to prove them wrong. So, nothing really ever happened at Tennessee. I know he had the one arrest that the charges got dropped or not even dismissed. They were dropped. They never even went to court or anything like that. Suspended license, something like that. So I think it's just that time of year. And if people hear a little nugget of something, they can turn it into something bigger. And maybe he falls down a couple spots in the first round and you're able to go get that guy. It's unfortunate, but that's how it goes.
It does. And let's say it is all true, and maybe it is. Lord knows. I definitely throw skepticism on it, but let's say even if it was, again, just the nature of a lot of it was just that he what's the right word? Just doesn't have that professionalism yet, I guess, is kind of the right way to put it. But again, a lot of guys don't coming out and you get them on an NFL roster and you give them the literal 9-to-5 treatment and they can embrace it. And he's shown, I think, enough of his physical traits and the value there that I just have such a hard time seeing that any team would put a ton of a value into this report and throw him down a draft board because of this. But we'll see on actual draft night here in a couple months or whatever. But I don't know. It just seemed goofy to me. Again, maybe it was behind the scenes, even though he was coached by one of the most hard-nosed guys on this entire staff and a guy that at least publicly really doesn't take crap off of anybody in Rodney Garner. That's just hard for me to believe some of that. But
yeah, it's a lot of it. You just hear all kinds of weird draft. I'm not a huge fan of the month or two leading up to the draft. I think there's just way more draft analyst and analysis out there that needs to be. That a lot of people just throw stuff out there, and man, NFL team, a lot of experts, right? Like NFL teams are missing on these guys every year. It's really difficult to figure out how guys are going to translate to the pros, and you mix that in with teams just feeding guys information that they know will regurgitate it into the content world, and maybe muddy the waters on how a player's viewed, and everybody's kind of like, is it real, is it not? It's nonsense, a lot of it.
There are two jobs in particular in sports media. Obviously, I, as someone who worked in sports media full time for a number of years, you who still does, I mean, we understand this stuff well, but there are two jobs where I just was always like, wow, you got to be a certain type of person to do that. One is a in the weeds recruiting reporter.
Yeah.
So like texting high schoolers all day long and like getting, oh, your visit to Nebraska, how did that make you feel? Like texting guys like that. I could not do it. That is just not who I am. And then the other one is, and hey, the guys that do it and they do it well, they have a lot of value. People pay subscription money every single month, and a ton of it, to a lot of different services for guys like that. But the other one is super in the weeds draft analyst, where just his hand is 4 3/4 inches across, and that means that the velocity on the ball that he can put in the like,
it's silly.
Stop
like,
it.
Are you in this range to be a pro athlete? Right? Are you fast enough, strong enough, big enough to actually compete against other fast enough, strong enough, big enough guys? Like, are you in that range? That's really all you need to know, right? Like, greatest wide receiver of all time, Jerry Rice, ran a terribly slow 40. Jawan Jennings, not fast at all, carried the 49ers offense at times last season. Like, let's not get too caught up in these numbers. You just got to be in that range.
Sports are weird. Like, and that does not our forever take is in, and this is true in all sports, it's especially true in baseball. We brought it up, but you gotta consider the vibes.
Yes.
Are the vibes on or are they off?
Are the vibes good? Is the kid a dog? If
yes,
check, I'll draft him.
Yes, exactly. Good vibes. Does he have that dog mentality? Does he have that Jawan Jennings dog in him?
And really, that just means, are you going to do what you have to do for the team to compete and win no matter what?
Yeah.
In the moment when you've got to come up big, are you going to be Jackson Dart and throw interceptions to the other team and lose against Kentucky and Florida and be terrible in crunch time? Or you just show up and be Tom Brady and go win the game? You know, you don't have that mentality. Jawan Jennings, like, I'm going to get this first down. I'm going to catch this ball over this cornerback that's more athletic than me and can jump higher than me, because that's what has to be done. Like, give me that guy over the 4.25 guy every time.
It's counterintuitive, but will goes a long way. Speaking of vibes, Tennessee baseball. Let's finish with this. We're at an hour and 13 minutes already.
No, we haven't had anything to talk about in weeks, so.
I know. Finally, an absolutely loaded show. It's been a ton of fun. But let's wrap it up with this, because this is not going to be too long, but it's going to be good. Tennessee baseball. So far, undefeated on the season. Went and had its first round of real games, quote unquote. Played some snoozers up to this point against Hofstra and different teams, and they just blasted them. Then went and they played an Oklahoma State team that's pretty meh, a Rice team that's not good, and they drilled both of those teams. But then Arizona's pretty good. If you watched them play, they beat, I believe in that, they beat Texas A&M and they beat Mississippi State in that stretch. And they played Arizona on Sunday, and I don't want to disparage Arizona, but at no point in that game was Tennessee baseball ever going to lose. Never. Like, they weren't. It was a stranglehold the entire time. And even like they didn't even get the bats going until the third or fourth inning. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it finally opened up, and Tennessee just blasted them. Gavin Keelan is an A-plus certified dog. You have some freshmen. Jay Abernathy, I mean, we were already hyping him up before we ever saw him play on this show, but looks awesome. Levi
Stick him
Clark,
anywhere on the field, by the way, and he's
yeah,
things happen.
Exactly. He's an athletic freak, Jay Abernathy, and then Levi Clark is going up and just blasting home runs, and he wasn't your top-rated guy coming out of high school. You have two freshmen at the bottom of your lineup who are just doing phenomenal things. Then you have a lineup. I can't believe I'm saying this, and I would not say this if I didn't think this is a real possibility. Your lineup this season it doesn't have the explosive star power. It doesn't have a Christian Moore, although I will say it looks like Gavin Keelan might be, up there if he continues to play the way that he has been playing. It doesn't have that explosive star power, but on the whole, top to bottom, I think this is probably more balanced overall than your lineup last year. Definitely at the bottom end of the lineup, those freshmen alone are bolstering you more than anybody at the bottom end of the lineup last year. And I mean, if Tennessee put together a better lineup after winning 60 games and a national championship, winning the SEC, and then winning a title, like, first of all, how horrifying for everybody else in that entire sport. But you add to that the pitching. Liam Doyle is just, I mean, we found a clip over the weekend, a guy at D1 Baseball saying that he has the best pitch in all of college baseball. He's been a complete dog. And then you move on. Marcus Phillips is looking better than last year. And then your weekend, you got Tegan Coons, who, no big deal, was just like one of the best pitchers in all of America to come out of high school last year. And then AJ Russell potentially coming back. Like, it is such a wealth of riches for this baseball team. I don't want to be too hyperbolic, Zach. How are you feeling so far?
Surprised, not that I expected them to be bad by any means, but I thought, losing the amount of guys that you did that were important to last year's team, Christian Moore especially, just kind of had that dog mentality and everything that goes along with winning games and came up in some huge spots for you. All that's tough to replace, but it really feels like these young guys come in, they sense the opportunity. They're not thinking about their MLB draft, prospects and all that. Like, they're coming in willing to do whatever they have to do. So many of these guys come up playing shortstop through middle school and high school, and they're the best player on every team they've ever been on. Now you got to go play left field, right? Or you got to sit on the bench and pinch run. And they're doing that, and they're excelling in that. And I think that's a culture thing that's really hard to replicate. But I think they know now, you come to Tennessee and you do that, you'll leave with a championship, possibly. And you're probably going to be a first, second, third round pick, like if you perform well. Because Tony Vitello is putting guy after guy after guy in the league right now. And some of them are starting to play well and play significant roles in their teams. When you get drafted, it takes a while in baseball to kind of rise to the top. But you're seeing these guys do it now that Vitello's coached. And it's not going to be long before one of them, is an all-star player. It's Christian Moore. If it's Ben Joyce as a reliever, whoever it ends up being, that's going to make a huge impact, and that's going to sell your program even more. But I think that mentality, and then Frank Anderson, the pitching development at Tennessee over the last several years, it's pretty amazing, and you see a guy like Chase Burns leave for Wake Forest because of what he thought pitching development was going to be there, and things worked out okay for Burns. He was a first-round pick. He didn't get to be a part of a championship team, but he was okay. But then you see a guy like Matthew Dallas that left Tennessee and got knocked around at Wake Forest this past weekend. It's like, just that you got the pitching lab, but do you know how to use it, right? Do you know what data how you're using the data? Like, that's important too. You got to know how to apply it. And it's just, you can't say enough about the pitching development because it's consistently year over year after year. You combine it with what we saw last season when they kind of had to bandage it all together to win the championship. Now you don't really have to do that at this point this year. You've got guys that are performing at a high level. That's really exciting going forward because that right there is what can carry you. The offense is going to go eventually. There's going to be a weekend where Tennessee does not score like crazy, right? They're going to have a 3-game stretch where they need to put zeros on the board, the pitchers do, to win the game. And you got the staff, I think, to do that. And that's exciting. So there's a lot. The depth, it's unfortunate that we don't know if they're going to get Osuna from UNC that transferred in, with his injunction being denied today. We don't know how that's going to turn out, if he'll be able to play for Tennessee at all this season. I mean, it's impossible to know. It is bizarre considering it's the same situation pretty much as Pavia at Vanderbilt that will be able to play next season. It seems open and shut easy, but Tennessee always gets screwed on these things, and it looks like he might get as screwed as you can get on it, which is unfortunate, but that was going to be a bonus anyway if you got him into the lineup with his power. But even without him, the depth of this lineup, that's going to be tough to take them down when it gets to the end of the season if everyone stays healthy, because you got so many guys that can answer the call, and you don't have to rely on just like, oh, we just got to get the order back around the Christian Moore spot. And that's not really what it was last season, but you don't have to have that mentality. That's exciting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the question always is, you could say, will this Tennessee team get beat ever? Yeah, they'll definitely lose some games. But who in America could beat this team 2 out of 3? And last year, it was nobody. And except oddly, ironically, the one that they lost was Alabama, strangely.
Sometimes it happens.
It does. The only sport Alabama's been able to beat Tennessee in. Crazily, they won 2 out of 3 there. But, I mean, I think you're shaping up to have another team where you go, who could beat this team 2 out of 3? Like, baseball is not a one-game sport. And, I mean, you look across, and I haven't seen one yet that I haven't watched everybody play, but this team is right at the tippy top of the sport yet again. And it just, like Mr. Jones says, did you see that home run that left the ballpark entirely? It landed in the parking lot. Yes, in an MLB stadium, and that was a freshman hit that ball, Levi Clark, I believe. And I loved this week that the strength and conditioning coach was finally getting kind of his due. People being like, wow, look at the power that Tennessee baseball has. It's Quentin Eberhardt, Q. And so awesome that he's finally kind of getting his due, because he's such a massive part of all of that. The coaching staff from top to bottom with Tony Vitello is just magical. And they're just going to be really good. Again, are they going to win another national title? I'm not. I got to see them play SEC ball. We'll see exactly how that turns out. But they did not break a sweat against. I mean, Arizona's, they're going to be a tournament team.
Yeah,
and like it wasn't close. And you were throwing freshmen against Arizona. It's an embarrassment of riches for this baseball team, man. So
I love that they're ranked number 2 by D1 this week too. Rankings don't mean anything in baseball, especially this early in the season. They're just for entertainment, I guess. But Tony Vitello's teams play better with a little chip on their shoulder, and I don't know if that's really going to offend them or not. But it is a little like, hey, you ain't number 1 yet, at least not in their eyes. So they will be soon enough if they keep it up, obviously. But I thought it was kind of funny that the LSU with 1 loss is still above them.
So stupid. Elias says they could hang 20 plus on Radford. Is that the next game?
I'm not sure. I guess maybe the midweek.
I was gonna look, when is, because I believe SEC play is next, not this weekend, but the next one is the start. Here we go. Schedule.
The SEC tournament and SEC play in baseball the same weekend.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. Especially if Tennessee can hang on. Yeah, so Radford is tomorrow night. Xavier this weekend. Oh no, so it's Radford Tuesday, Xavier Wednesday, and then a weekend series against St. Bonaventure. So that's going to be all wins, and then West Georgia next Friday, Florida in Knoxville.
Okay,
That's a fun series. Florida top 5. I mean, yeah, that's an exciting one.
That'd be a big measuring stick there. We'll see how good they really are then.
Yes, 100%. Now, they come out of that smelling like roses. Like, we're probably going to be predicting national championships at that point.
By April 1st.
Hey, look, Tony did it to himself. This is the expectation that he's created. He shouldn't have won a national title if he didn't want me to think that. So, I'm Charlie Burris. That's Zach Reagan. That's a show. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. Tons of comments tonight. You guys were awesome. As always, we couldn't appreciate it, and we could not do this without you. Yeah, you know where to find us. Thanks again for watching. Go check out A to Z Sports, where all the stuff that Zach writes, atozsports.com, and you know where to find us here. So that's it. Yeah, that's it. We'll talk to y'all next week.
See you guys later.